The Mueller report continues to fall apart. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And yes, the Mueller report continues to fall apart. There have been things that I've said on the show going back for almost a year, and those things are now coming to fruition, and I would like to discuss those things. And I do so with a certain degree of glee, because this is one of those things where, again, I got it right. And for the last 3 years, the conspiracy theorists on mainstream media who were paid handsomely got it wrong. They got it wrong. At least potentially got it wrong. If you guys enjoy this content and you find yourself coming back to this channel often, please consider supporting this content through PayPal or Patreon. The channel gets demonetized often just because of the content that we do, be it sex trafficking, be it Iran, or be it this topic. So this one was interesting. And shout out to Aaron Matei, who's ever vigilant buzzsaw, especially on this particular issue. The case that Mueller brought against the Internet Research Agency, or the co-defendant of the Internet Research Agency, but the case that Mueller brought against the Russian company. In this case, I want to be very specific with the name of the company, because Concord Management and Consulting. Now, the Internet Research Agency is the co-defendant of this group. If you remember, Mueller indicted these guys. And the Mueller report, even though it doesn't show a link between Trump and Russia, it goes a long way to create this disinformation campaign that was put out into the American media. Now, well, this was taking place and people were talking about this. I made the point that, well, A, this was a private company, and B, a private company that was a clickbait farm. That clickbait farm would have every interest in the world of pulling out content, clickbait, because that's the way they make their money, based on what is taking place in the populace to which they're trying to gain the clicks. Meaning, the majority of these ads took place after the election. And these ads were all over the place. It wasn't just this notion of pro-Trump. It went all across the place. Some of it dealt with dildos. Some of it dealt with Jesus and masturbation. These ads went over the phone. And I'll even show you a few. One had Jesus wrestling Satan. They were all over the place. My point was, this was a private company. And this private company would have every interest in the world in going along with the currents of whatever society they were putting these clicks in. The fact that there was an election brewing makes all the sense in the world that you would tailor your ads based on the election. Now, people looking at this through a very specific lens of Trump and Russia said, oh my God, these guys are putting ads in order to get Trump elected. That made no sense. The point that this was a private company made more sense. They immediately connected this to Russia. It's a Russian company, and because it's a Russian company, it has to be working at the behest of the Russian government. Ergo, Vladimir Putin. Putin is interrupting our elections. Oh my God! It's an act of war. It's an act of war. The media ran with this for the last 3 years. A fait accompli. Sacrosanct. The moment that you mention a private company in Russia, you're immediately talking about Vladimir Putin. Well, a judge says you can't do that. A judge comes back and says, look, just because mainstream media was making the connection between those two things, you have prejudiced a jury that is going to look at this case. Mueller, I would suggest, had no intention for any of these companies that he put this kind of, that he was trying to call to court, to actually come to court. However, this company did come to court. And this company is fighting Mueller back on this. And one of the things that the judges came back with was, you're right. You're right. No link has been established in the Mueller report. There have just been allegations of a link. Allegations of a link is a little bit different than the link itself. And in the report that Mueller put out, he has not established a link between the private company and the Russian government. He's just asserted it. There's a difference in those things. Mueller and Barr saying that the link established creates a prejudicial situation. The judge went so far as to discuss this notion of holding them in contempt for doing so, making the point that what the mainstream media does and the bar that mainstream media has is much lower. And just because media said it doesn't necessarily mean that you can assert it in a legal sense. Just saying. I'm not going to say I told you so, even though I'm saying I told you so. Let's take a look at the document itself. And shout out to Aramate for identifying the passages in the legal document. I'm showing the document itself, or at least I'm putting a link to it. And I want to add one more thing. This is a guy on Chris Hayes. When this first came out, and people were flipping out, because you must understand, think of it from the perspective of Democrats want to find anything they can and hit Trump on. So this becomes a big issue for Democrats, in which they just kind of run with it. They don't look at problems with the report, if that makes sense. The Democratic Party is not looking to bring up the flaws. They're only looking to kind of yell and scream at the height of their lungs that, some connection exists, and the Mueller report is... The Mueller report has several flaws in it. I've enunciated those flaws. One, they never talked to Julian Assange, what I've noted was an amazing flaw or defect. You're asserting that Julian Assange was instrumental in a disinformation campaign in the United States, and yet you don't go to talk to Assange. That's a massive gaping hole. If the goal of this was to figure out what took place, then Assange would be the person that you go to talk to, seeing as you call him an instrumental figure in the case. Klemnik, this notion of a guy who was supposed to be a Russian asset, and you find out that he was a U.S. asset, an intelligence asset, that's left out of report. That's a glaring omission. You get into the honeypots that was used to try to entrap Papadopoulos, even Papadopoulos' role in the first place. All of this comes across as defects and flaws within the context of the Mueller report. I got to be honest, I didn't care all that much when Mueller was going to testify on July 17th, but I've become more and more interested in that testimony, providing people ask him about these things. You've had 3 years and you come back with glaring flaws in your report. Was the goal really to get to the bottom of this? Or was the goal something else? Was the goal something else? Listen to this gentleman talk about the research agency, the place, the private entity that they are saying is working for the Russian government.
Social media marketing campaign with 90 people, a couple $1 million, $2 million behind it, run by people who have, a bare grasp of the English language and not a full understanding of who they're targeting, what they're targeting. I think if you think about that in terms of just a normal marketing campaign, that's not going to be a very the paranoia aspect, right? The idea that there is this, kind of all-powerful or immense propaganda machine that's going on, and that anybody who's tweeting something that you don't like or is kind of causing trouble on the internet can be chalked up to Russia. That is a very powerful thing that's going on, and is really increasing now, I think, in the wake of these indictments in kind of a worrying way.
The reason why this gentleman came onto the show, if I remember correctly, is because Chris Hayes had people on the show that were saying stuff like this was a Pearl Harbor. That this internet research agency or this clickbait farm putting these clickbaits out, and they've said that this was connected to Vladimir Putin was somehow tantamount to some kind of technical Pearl Harbor, or some kind of digital Pearl Harbor. It's utter nonsense and lunacy. And the guy was making the point that this was a private company that was a clickbait farm that was trying to get clicks. And just so we're very clear who we're talking about, here are some of the ads. You could color your own Bernie hero. There's one for Trump. Make America Great Again. Join Florida Trump rallies. Satan, if I win, Clinton wins. Jesus, not if I can help it. Oh yeah, I totally want to go out and vote for Trump now. Never forget the Black Panthers group formed to protect the black people from the KKK that was dismantled the U.S. government, but the KKK still exists today. Oh, I'm going to go and vote Democrat now. Heritage, not hate, the South will rise again. It's a clickbait farm. The goal of it is to maximize their clicks, The goal of it wasn't to get Trump elected or Clinton elected. The goal was to maximize their clicks. It just so happens that during an election, those clickbaits will go towards electoral aims. They made this into this grand Russian conspiracy. The point that the judge was making is that you don't know that. This was a private entity, and you haven't been able to create a link between this private entity and the Russian government. And you've alluded to that in your testimony, meaning Barr and Mueller. So this is the report itself. U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. It was unsealed last night. The passages of interest right here. So this is what the judge makes the point that there was allusions to the fact that there was a social media campaign that was carried out at the behest of the Russian government. Now, the judge goes out and makes a point. The special counsel's report describes efforts by the Russian government to interfere with 2016 presidential election. But the indictment, which alleges that the private Russian entities and the individuals conducted an information warfare campaign designed to sow discord among U.S. voters, does not link the defendants to the Russian government. Save for single allegations that Concord and Concord Catering had several government contracts, the indictment alleges only private conduct by private actors. I hope that makes sense. You're saying that these guys were pushed by the Russian government. You have not been able to demonstrate that. You have just been asserting that. It's a difference. And the fact that some media outlets might have reported as much before the release of the report does not eliminate the prejudice to Concord. Regardless of the media coverage before the report, it is significant and prejudicial that the government itself drew a link between the defendant and the Russian government, because that link was not demonstrative. You've asserted it. You haven't been able to show it. In short, the court concludes that the government violated Rule 57.7 by making or authorizing the release of public statements that link the defendants' alleged activities to the Russian government and provide an opinion about the defendants' guilt and the evidence against them. The court will therefore proceed to consider the appropriate response to the violation, beginning with the possibility of contempt. The judge in this case was saying, we may hold you in contempt for making such an assertion when you weren't able to demonstrate this in an evidentiary way. You've prejudiced the jury, sir. The judge, however, looked at this and said, we're still going to continue because we don't believe that this is completely debilitating to the case, but going forward, we are gagging people from being able to talk about this in a way that's trying to say that these guys are guilty. They need to have a fair trial, and you can't have a fair trial if these guys are out there telling the public that they're guilty in advance. Oh, this is awesome! This is awesome! This is awesome! This is awesome! So I'm going to leave this here because I didn't want this one to be long. I have additional shows for today, and I'll see you guys in a few. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. And I'm putting a link to some of the problems with the Mueller report beyond the things that I've said in the past that Mateus pointed out. There are problems with the Mueller report. And there are problems with assertions that Mueller has made that are found to be wanting, false, or somewhat odd in the timeline of events. Especially, Aramate makes the point of the way they're talking about WikiLeaks received the information, put the information out, and even asserting that there was Russian governmental assistance in this, even though that's somewhat of an assertion. That's not something that you can demonstrate. It is I'll leave this here because I don't want to go long, and I've done multiple videos on this. So if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. I'll see you momentarily.